Hạnh Lê xin trân trọng kính chào quý thính giả của VCAL TV. Và đầu tiên chúng tôi xin được trân trọng giới thiệu đến quý vị một vị khách mời rất đặc biệt ngày hôm nay, đó là ông Richard Botkin. Và người thứ hai đó là bình luận gia Phạm Gia Đại. First of all, welcome to the show, Mr. Richard Botkin.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thank you for being here and chào bình luận gia Phạm Gia Đại.
Vâng, xin chào chị và chào quý vị khán giả.
You are the writer and also the executive producer for the movie. So what did inspire you to write and then after that make the movie?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. No, I fell into this story. I credit God with this effort. I met my main American character, John Ripley, and then when I met him, I also met my main Vietnamese character, Le Ba Bin, and it was from then I was hooked. It took me 5 years to write the book. I went to Vietnam 4 times. It was an absolute thrill for me because I got to travel to Vietnam with Bin and walk the battlefields, and he showed me where he grew up and really got a sense for what it was like.
So you met both sides?
I met both of them at a reunion of the American Marine officers who were advisors to the Vietnamese Marine Corps. The American Marine Corps and the Vietnamese Marine Corps had a very close bond, and it was really it was such an amazing thing to experience because these guys loved each other. I met my main American, John Ripley, really he loved Le Ba Bin, and Bin, it turned out, was truly an amazing man. I mean, he was sort of a metaphor. He was typical of so many men in that generation. Right? He grew up in World War II, saw the Japanese, and then the French came back, and he lived in the North, and he didn't. His father had moved to Saigon, but they went through all those things, and then in 1962 he became a Vietnamese Marine officer, and he came to America, but he was in combat from 1962 until the day the war ended, and then he got put in prison for 10.5 years. And I also tried to include the story of the wives, and his wife, Cam Ban, was typical of the best Vietnamese women as well, and her story is equally good because she was faithful to him and went through all the hard times. They came here in the, early 1990s with nothing. They started over. Their daughter went to college. I mean, it's the typical, the best type of Horatio, in America we call them Horatio Alger stories, where you start with nothing, you work hard, you do well. And they represent the American Vietnamese community, in my opinion, so well. And it was an exciting thing for me to be a part of. It was pure joy.
What was some of the challenge for you when you bring up this movie, this film to the big screen?
Well, I wrote the book, and the book took me 5 years, and if I'd known it would have taken me 5 years when I started, I probably wouldn't have done it because I'm basically lazy. But I'm so glad I wrote the book. But after the book was out, I realized most people don't read anymore.
Yeah.
So I thought maybe we should make it into and I had never wanted to make a movie, and I don't think I'd ever recommend it to anybody unless they're a filmmaker. But I'm glad we made the movie because it really did for the Vietnamese community in particular. They seem to appreciate it, and for me personally, from that film, I made so many friends in the American Vietnamese community. I go to Cambodia now with a group of American Vietnamese doctors and dentists and pharmacists and optometrists, and we do work with the stateless ethnic Vietnamese in Cambodia. And if it wasn't for the film, we wouldn't have done that, and so I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
I feel like God used us for that.
Yeah, so Mr. Richard, the film is mainly focused on the heroism of the ARV and also the U.S. Marine. So why do you think their story have been overlooked in the mainstream media?
That's a great question. I think part of the problem in America is we always look at things, because America is the biggest country, right? We look at things from only an American perspective, and I've always been a fan. I grew up in Hawaii, so I had an Asian exposure, but once I met Bin and his wife and started learning, because I knew very little about, I was a Marine, I served after Vietnam, but The Vietnamese story is so compelling. It's so compelling. And most people have no idea. I think even young American Vietnamese kids, and I'm hoping that we'll reach some of them, and hope some of them will come to the film, because they really need to understand the price of freedom that was paid specifically for them. I don't think there's I don't think there's a group in America that has come in and in one generation really gone from literally nothing to so much success and appreciation. And I had a friend tell me she's not a real American like me. I said, are you kidding? You're more of an American. Most of us Americans have never paid that kind of price for freedom. And most of us are pretty soft. And I think one of the challenges for the American Vietnamese youth today is they become too Americanized and they're getting soft. And I think it's important for the parents and grandparents who came here as children and had to really fight. I like to boast about my friends. All the docs on my team, number one, they're smarter than me. They're a lot wealthier than I am. They're younger than me. And they love America more than me. I love being around them. They're just phenomenal people to be around. I say send more. I really do believe that the unintended best consequence of the Vietnam War was that 1.5 million Vietnamese came here and they made America better. Big time. They improved the gene pool. Really? No, I mean that. And I think if anybody steps back and considers that, if they don't agree with me, there's something wrong. And you know, I got to talk about Dai. He's got a book out, and it's one of the best books I've read on the Vietnam War. It really is. And nobody, I mean, Bin, my character, 10.5, 11 years in prison. I mean, that's from kindergarten to 10th grade for Americans. But he was in prison for 17 years. That's impossible. You read his book, 1 page is, or, you know, 5 pages is a year. How can you reduce that to words? It's impossible to contemplate that level of pain, suffering, and evil. So we need to focus on these things to appreciate what America is and how special freedom is and how we have to fight for it every now and then. And I do believe, I'll go to my grave believing the Vietnam War was a righteous war, because the price paid by the Americans, and more especially by the Vietnamese, it slowed the development of communism in Asia around. If it wasn't for our effort in Vietnam, Southeast Asia would look so much different. And that's not an American observation. That's Lee Kuan Yew, who was the founding prime minister of Singapore. We bought time for the rest of Asia. There were, by the way, I mean, I'm going on and on here, but when Americans went ashore in March of 1965, there were 7 active insurgencies. And there were active insurgencies in 7 countries. It wasn't just Vietnam. So we slowed it down, and hundreds of millions of people in Southeast Asia have people like Dai to thank for their sacrifices, because their freedom, their commercial success, their economic success is largely because of the sacrifices made by the Vietnam generation, the Vietnamese and American generation.
Ông có trả lời cái câu hỏi của chị Hạnh ấy, thì ông cho biết rằng là đa số những người Mỹ đó, khi mà họ làm phim đó, họ làm phim về phía của người Mỹ, chứ ít người mà nghĩ tới chuyện làm phim về người phía Việt Nam, chính phủ Việt Nam, hay là về quân đội Việt Nam Cộng Hòa đâu. Nhưng mà ông có cái duyên ông gặp lại được cựu trung tá Lê Bá Bình và gặp gia đình của ông Bình, và thấy rằng họ đã phấn đấu để họ trở thành cái gia đình tiêu biểu thành công ở trên nước Mỹ đó. Nhưng mà những người Việt Nam qua đây thì họ đã mang một cái ý tưởng rằng là dầu sao họ vẫn là người Việt Nam, họ không thể nào là người American được. Cho nên ông bảo không, quý vị các anh chị cũng vẫn là người Mỹ chứ không phải là người Việt Nam đâu. Vẫn là Mỹ hơn là Việt Nam. Cho nên là ông nói rằng ông mới nghĩ tới cái việc mà làm cái cuốn phim này để cho mà người ta nhìn thấy là cái trong cái cuộc chiến tranh vừa qua tại Quốc Cộng vừa qua đó, thì đã có hàng trăm ngàn người đã hy sinh trong cái cuộc chiến đó, và họ đã hy sinh cách rất là âm thầm, hy sinh trên chiến trận và sau này hy sinh trong cái trại giam của Cộng sản nữa. Và còn những người sống sót, ông có nói là như chúng tôi đây là một trong người đã sống sót và đã viết ra cái cuốn hồi ký những người từ cuối cùng mà ông đã có dịp mà tặng ông, và ông đã đọc và ông rất là thích cuốn hồi ký đó. Ông nói rằng đó là nói lên những cái trang sử oai hùng của lịch sử của Việt Nam Cộng Hòa của chúng ta, mà trong cái thời gian mà ông được biết ông Lê Bá Bình đó thì ông mới suy nghĩ và ông mới đi tới cái việc mà quyết định để phải làm cái cuốn phim này, để mà có thể mà đưa ra cho mọi người nhìn thấy những cái khía cạnh mà nói rằng là hy sinh của bao nhiêu người Việt Nam trong cuộc chiến đó. Rồi bây giờ là họ mới có ngày hôm nay họ được đi qua mà định cư ở trên đất Mỹ sau những tàn phá của chiến tranh như thế nào.